sort of an interfaith, interspiritual, we all have our stories and we honor them kind of place. So we're going to start with a guided meditation. Ken is going to share that with us. So as soon as Ken starts talking, probably the easiest thing to do is just go to speaker view up there so that we see him. Ken.
Hi, hello. So what I'd like to do is to start by grounding us. So I'll do sort of a couple of phases. I won't take long at this, of course, I know. So I'll ground us in the body. I'm going to invite us to breathe in a certain way, which is to breathe deeply in our stomach and to exhale for twice as long as you inhale. So if you inhale like a 4 count, take a little longer and exhale like an 8 count, if you will. It's also best if you can exhale and inhale through your nose. And if you can't, it's all good. Just sit comfortably. And then I'm going to have a little bit about us together. Okay? So sit comfortably. You can close your eyes or open them as you wish. I like to keep them a little bit open, but maybe looking down so that I'm not distracted by other things that are going on in the house. And I'll start. I'd like to invite you to start to take 4 or 5 just normal deep breaths in your stomach. Just breathing in and breathing out. Being aware that you are breathing in. Being aware that you are breathing out. 4 or 5. Now I invite you to continue to deeply breathe, but to breathe out, take longer in breathing in, to change your breathing a little bit from its normal pattern. Just breathing in and breathing out. A couple of deep breaths like that. While you continue to breathe like that, I invite you to feel what you're feeling right now, firstly in your body. Perhaps you can feel the weight of your feet against the floor. You can feel the chair underneath you. Is your body warm? Is it cool? I'd like you to pay attention to the various parts of your body and see if you're holding any stiffness or tension. And if you are, I invite you to feel free to move that part of your body, stretch the muscle, allow yourself to relax, to be calm, to be comfortable. Continue to breathe deeply in your stomach, exhaling longer than inhaling. Just bring your awareness to the various parts of your body. We often hold tension in our shoulders or our foreheads, our face. Bring your attention to those places, and if you have tension or stiffness there, I invite you to relax and let it go, to stretch it out if you'd like. Now I invite you to pay attention to your senses, to what you might be seeing, what you might be hearing beyond my voice. Perhaps there is a smell, perhaps breakfast or lunch. I now invite you to pay attention to your thoughts. Just spend a moment. What thoughts are arising? You're not fighting them, you're just becoming aware of them. From your thoughts, emotions arise. I invite you to be aware of any emotions you might be feeling today. That might be underneath the surface. Perhaps uncertainty. Perhaps a sense of warmth of being together. Perhaps you feel the comfort of God. I invite you to maybe open your eyes a little and take a look at the people who are here with us today. I invite you to wish them well and peace and harmony. Have gratitude for them to be here today. Just send them your love. If there are people with you in the room or close by to you, wish them wellness and peace and harmony. And send them your love. Outside of in the world, there are many people where you can send them wellness and peace and harmony. And send them your love. And to yourself, send yourself wellness and peace and harmony. And send yourself love. I invite you to follow your breath for 4 or 5 breaths. I will end with the sound of the bell. I like it when you rub your hands together and let them get warm. Run them around your ears a little, over the top of your head if you like. Just move your head and get the stiffness out. It's like being at a spa with a hot towel.
Thank you, Ken. We're back in gallery view, if for those of you who went off to speaker view. And as we always do with Souls in Sync, we start with some questions to consider and to have a conversation about that sort of sets the theme. When we were thinking about what we needed in this time, we were talking about suffering and solidarity, how we're all sort of suffering together, and that there are ways, rather than just being just, hey, good for you. There's a going beyond that as a solidarity, how we stand together. And so I was thinking sort of the three words that seem for me to be a really big part of this time is suffering, solitude, and solidarity. And those are the spaces that we're talking about today. So the first question that we have is, what is your biggest struggle with social distancing? We're all involved in this space, so everyone has a different story about it. But what are the struggles that we have in social distancing? Anybody? Ken?
Yeah, I mean, maybe to remain solid and not, and grounded here and now, not to say, oh, this could happen, that could happen. And when you do, then it doesn't, it carries you away,
Mm.
And being carried away is not the best.
No.
Yeah.
So that's interesting, because I feel that too. I think a lot of people, instead of sort of trying to live today, everyone's talking about, when will this be over? You end up living in the future so much, and talking so much about, oh, when this is over, then I'll do this, and you have these sort of plans. Like, for instance, at the church, we have this Camp Kasota that's happening in June, which we haven't canceled yet, but it seems like it's going to be something that we will have to cancel. Although we're not going to make the decision until May, but there's so much of this already. And in that, the leader to the south of us, who's like, we got to get the economy back, and that living in the future instead of finding yourself in the presence, grounding in the presence, is a real problem with this time of social distancing. Anyone else?
I think, if I may jump in, I think one of the things that I think is so beautiful about the Christian teaching of today, Palm Sunday, is that the scripture tells of Jesus knowing he's facing death and still taking the time to have a procession into town and a celebration. And I think that really speaks to this idea of celebrating while we can. And really, the only time we do have is now, as you said, Joanne. And I wanted to share a little something that happened to my kids and I yesterday. We had stayed in the house for a few days because it was so cold, not even going for any walks or anything like that. And yesterday was our first walk after a while, and we were so happy to be outside, and the sun was shining, and we came around the corner. And on this block, we were treated with hundreds and hundreds of Bohemian waxwings, taking up all the trees. And it took us about 30 minutes to work through that block. We were just in awe. It felt like such a blessing. It was all these birds that were just for us. And it really reminded me of the grace that I see in so many of these moments, that it really is just now. And if we're waiting for next week or next month or next year, we are in my view, really, really wasting our precious time.
Mm-hmm. Anyone else, if you'd like to speak, just raise your hand and unmute.
Joanne, there's a comment on the chat as well.
Wait, I just... no physical contact when you live alone is what Anne says. And yeah, that is a struggle for so many people. And a friend of mine, well, and those who go to McDougall know her, Ruth Dunsire, sent me an email and just said, you know, and she's a very huggy person, not being able to hug her grandchildren, you know, for instance, like she has someone there, but the way she's carried on her life is to be very affectionate. And yeah, when you live alone and you can't pass the peace or hug or be in contact with anyone, that's very isolating. So thanks for that, Anne. Joanne.
Who, me?
Oh, well, it just went to you. I guess we heard some noise. We're just discussing what the biggest struggle is with social distancing. And you can either send a chat and Dave, if you just monitor those, or you can just speak. So anyone else got any struggles?
This is Marilyn. I have struggles because we're still working. We're considered an essential service at the courthouse. So it's been interesting to see, actually in my office, there's almost like a peacefulness that's come over because the ones that are there have been very consistent for the last, I don't know, week to 2 weeks because people have been on isolation. So it's been interesting to see how our interaction, that we're almost a more peaceful place to be, which seems kind of ironic with everybody dealing with their own internal struggles that they're dealing with. I think there's a certain tolerance that's going along that we don't normally have in our day-to-day work.
Do you think, Marilyn, the fact that we're all in this together, like we have this shared struggle, has something to do with that? Because I read an article today about the Canadian government and how all the premiers and the prime minister are actually working together in ways that we haven't seen before. And it has to do with this, we're Team Canada now, you know, like we're all in this together. Do you think that's maybe influenced your work site too?
I think so. I think so.
Yeah.
People, as I say, more patient with each other, more tolerance. So it's actually been nice to see that. I mean, it didn't show itself right away, but after several days, and I've been in and out of the office because I'm using up all vacation time, but it is nice to see us working the way that we are together because it's become a smaller unit, I guess, is part of it too.
Well, that kind of moves us on to the second question, which is, what have you learned while social distancing? What are some of the things you maybe learned about yourself or about your relationships with other people, or anybody have any thoughts on that?
I learned this morning that I can make my own eggs Benedict. Usually I'm very privileged that when my spouse is off work on the weekend, sometimes she'll make it for me and she's better at it. But I made my own this morning and it didn't turn out too badly. And I don't really want to tell her that though. I'm appreciative of her when she takes care of me in that way.
Yeah, you know, in terms of the meal thing, we've been people who like to eat out a lot. And what I've learned, well, and I will say, you know, I was going to say that we can cook at home, but actually Dave can cook at home. And I really enjoy his meals, but that sense of table, you know, my daughter comes in and out, actually. She lives away, but she does visit us. And she's like, we're sitting down at the table and she's like, what, we're having meals here now? Like we had with adult children, you know, everyone sort of eats at different times, but we've actually come back to this sitting at the table with each other, which is a real gift, you know, like I think I've missed that table time. And Dave does a wonderful job cooking all kinds of things. And I'm really, you know, I've learned that those little tiny things, those moments are really important and to be valued.
Joanne, Lori says on the chat, empathy to my husband being stuck at home.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lori's husband, Phil, has a respiratory illness, chronic respiratory illness, and is very high risk for this disease. So he can't go out at all. And there are others. Yeah. So empathy for those who are really high risk, or those who are in like the nursing homes where it's just ravaging the place. It's just devastating. So any other things about struggles or what you've learned?
One thing I've learned is it's going to be interesting to see the impacts on the planet in terms of so much reduced emissions and so on. So it'll be, we're already seeing effects, positive effects from so few cars on the road and so on. So that will be something could be very positive from this. So
there was an article with pictures of wildlife in cities around the world because people aren't out. So they're going back into their old territories, and it's just like, you know, walking through the streets. It's really interesting. Shauna, you had a comment.
Yeah, one thing I'm learning is that the times, you know, just relating to social distancing, the times that I am in contact with people, like through these Zoom chats and Tony sessions, or even the couple times I've gone outside and you see somebody on the bike path or whatever, those moments have become kind of amplified in a way because that's your only contact with people through the day or through a couple days even. And it makes me feel, I don't know, for sure there's social distancing, but then I don't feel so distant, I guess, because I'm so focused on these really small moments that have become sort of a bigger part of my day that I might have just passed through them without even thinking twice about it. So that's something. And also, like my kids started homeschooling last week, and their school is really, really well organized, and they have video chats and things. And so with Theo, I've been sitting beside him as he chats with the other students and the teacher just to keep him kind of on the right page and stuff. And I feel more tapped into my kids' learning in the last 5 days than I have like all year, I don't think, because, you know, I help them with their homework and stuff when I need to, but I'm not really tapped into what happens at school. But now you see the teacher, the other kids, and all their questions, and it's really charming. Like it's really, I feel like I have a better understanding of what my kids are learning and how they're learning, and the school really turned things around really fast. And so just these moments like this have become sort of a bigger part of my day, and I just appreciate them so much more than I probably would have before.
Well, that works into this last question. How do we help each other now? And I know one of the ways we help each other is by having these opportunities to connect, even when we're in our own places, and working that out. Does anyone else have any other ideas about how we help each other now?
I've kind of found interesting, Prime Minister Trudeau has used a lot of language around duty and kind of drawing to mind the image of like a wartime or something like that, where we have a responsibility to one another. And I feel like that's actually something that many of us have never experienced. Certainly I have not experienced that, other than voting and things like that. There's never really been anything that would make my generation feel drawn in together in a way that is sort of imposed, but like dutifully and sort of gratefully taken on. And I think that staying home and listening to the advice that we're being given is helping each other. And it's so important for us to really take that to heart. And obviously we can see through the news, and if anyone has had to go out, you can see that not everyone is paying attention to that. But I kind of am really appreciating that languaging of it. Not that I'm, you know, pro wartime or anything like that, but I just think it kind of harkens to a time that I certainly heard of, you know, with grandparents who served in the military, that kind of seriousness and sobriety and just taking on board what you have to move forward.
Yeah. Anyone else thoughts on that, how we can help each other? Joanne?
Yes, I certainly agree with Amy on that one, and that there are things that we can do both in the wider community, but in our church community as well. The people that we know are socially isolated and have been even before this. That how we can help each other, I think, is with the means that we have. We're learning how to use Zoom, but some of us have been connecting with our relatives in other places using Skype. It's not that foreign to us, or FaceTime, and continue those conversations, not just this week and last week, but this is going to continue. Like, one conversation isn't enough. We need to continue. And for those people who are, it's like been put into the, what do they call it? Well, isolation, when you're in prison, and then you get sent off to solitary, right? I feel like that's what we've done with our senior of seniors. I mean, I'm a senior. I'm talking about the seniors now. That those that
Really old people.
yeah, with the fact that my children are concerned that we are old and shouldn't get our own groceries concerns me. But but there are the really isolated, and they've been isolated before this. That what can we do if they don't have Wi-Fi on their cell phone? They might have a cell phone. How can we get them connected so they can have some FaceTime with us in our church community? And with their families, that we need to bring them on board in terms of the ways that those of us that do have technology at our fingertips, how can we bring in those that perhaps haven't been using it? Because this is going to go on for a while. So that's my offering on how we can help, is how do we bring those that are still not in the Zoom world, the Skype world, how can we bring them into these conversations?
Yeah, I noticed Amy sent on chat that the good old church phone tree, which we have done once and I think are doing again this week.
Yeah.
And the people who haven't been at church saying, oh, I'm so glad you're paying attention to me. Like, I'm so glad I got this call. So yeah, the old fashioned phone is better than nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And Anne says, which everyone could see on the chat, but that she got Kathleen Hadlett, who is an older woman, and she can't see very well or hear very well anymore. She's 94, but she came to her door, and they had a yell conversation, a wave, and a smile. And I've seen other people do that too, where they go visit their grandparents. They don't want to go in, so they stand outside by the window, and they have the conversation on the phone while they can see each other. So there's our old-fashioned ways too. Thank you for this rich conversation about the struggles and such of social distancing. So now Amy is going to give us a little reflection.
I would be happy to do that. So this kind of goes hand in hand with something I'm going to be doing a little bit later in our gathering. But one of the things that I kind of had on the page as I was trying to come up with what I would say today is just this affirmation statement, meditation. I am here. And from there, I kind of was thinking a lot about our themes of suffering and our theme of solidarity. And this is what came through. So yesterday I went out for the first time in quite a while, and I had to take my cat to the vet. He was ill, and I have to say I was shocked to see so many cars out. I had been following the instructions to stay home, but clearly not everyone was doing the same. And I was thinking as I drove down McLeod Trail that clearly not everyone had a sick cat crying in a carrier on the floor, nor was everybody off to a shift as a vital employee, perhaps in food chain supply or healthcare or public safety. And my first thought, I have to be honest, was a thought of judgment. How dare these people be out and about, maybe going to the mall, maybe going to just sort of find somewhere to go, whether it's the grocery store, which we've heard people have been getting in trouble for chatting it up at the grocery store. But I was feeling a sense of judgment. And I wasn't very happy about feeling that way, to be honest. And so as I thought about that more and questioned myself about that, I was thinking about how, for some of us, being alone is the hardest thing to do. One of the things that has been hard for me to talk about during this time is how, coming from a background with quite a lot of trauma, I haven't really been suffering during this time. Growing up, I was never really connected to a community outside of my home, other than going to school. But I didn't go to church, and I didn't play sports, and I didn't do really anything other than go to school and come home. And home was really challenging a lot of the time for me. And I learned how to be alone. I would hide out in my room. I would hide out in my mind. And so one of the things that makes me good at my calling is that I know my own internal landscape really, really well. And what my reaction to the seeing all those cars was one of judgment, gave me an insight about how I can continue to deepen my call and be a better minister. And that was that not everyone has the tools that I was given. Not everyone has the background that I have, and they didn't learn the things that I learned. And so we are all in this together. And I thought about how people might be out trying to avoid their suffering. And I thought about how, for so many of us, if we can pretend that we are not sad or angry or afraid, whether that be by shopping or by drinking or by avoiding, we can trick ourselves into thinking that we can kick the can down the road a little further for another day. And I thought about how in my own rush to judgment, that was one of the ways that I learned in my family to displace and project my own discomfort. I learned how to put it out onto other people so that I might not have to deal with it. Richard Rohr said in one of his recent meditations that I get in my inbox every day, that we don't handle suffering, but rather that suffering has its way with us. And our modern popular culture is not comfortable with that notion at all. The thought that we might allow ourselves to be penetrable to our anxieties, to our fears, just doesn't sit well with most of us. Us Westerners, we like to think of ourselves as the top of the food chain. We are powerful, we are in control, we are self-assured, and we have a million ways normally to keep that veneer somewhat intact. That is on regular days. But even then, inevitably, life will creep in. Sometimes it is like water seeping into a basement, the basement of our unconscious. It can be subtle and creeping. But other times, like now, it's overt and demanding, like a war, like death, like a global pandemic. And so 12-step wisdom tells us that we have to be sick and tired of being sick and tired before we are cracked open enough to heal. Our Buddhist friends, they tell us that presence to each moment is a path to an awakened life, where we cease to allow suffering to be a burden to us. And in fact, suffering triumphs in teaching us about who and what we really are. Our Christian wisdom, too, for millennia has told us how triumph and tragedy are inextricable from one another. That faith and that grace, in the face of both of those things, are saving. Being with ourselves in a deep way and attending to our own suffering is a profound way for us to connect with the other. And I think perhaps it is a way that we can actually see that there is no other. I believe ultimately that we are one. And I believe that what troubles the water can provide the deepest and most profound reflection to us. But we must be brave enough to look, brave enough to be still, and we must remember that despite how it looks, you are not alone. You have never been alone, nor will you ever be alone. We are one, and we are held in creation together. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Amy. That was lovely. I particularly resonated with that thought that people want to get out so that they don't have to be alone with themselves. And learning to do that is a real gift. As Amy was saying, we're in Holy Week right now. And this is the first day of Holy Week. And so I've written a little reflection called Holy Week in Uncertain Times. If things were normal, today would bring a burst of hosannas. The Palm Parade, the first event of Holy Week. It fools you. You think with all those praises, those palm branches waving, those cloths on the road that Jesus travels on a donkey as a man of peace, that the tide has turned. Our long weeks of Lent are over. It's small but important respite on a road that will get worse before it gets better. If things were normal, we would be like Jesus in the temple. We would gather to learn and pray and meditate together. Words like, love God with your heart, soul, and mind, and your neighbor as yourself would be sung and shared. We would call out the hypocrites and make plans for collective social justice. We would debate the finer points of our place in the world. It's hard to change the world sitting in your pajamas in front of a computer screen. We cannot come together. Loving your neighbor from a distance is possible, but so much harder. It will get worse before it gets better. If things were normal, Jesus' respite at the home of his friends in Bethany would be an oasis in a tumultuous week. Who doesn't love a good dinner with friends, laughing at stories you've heard 100 times, gossiping about so-and-so who did this and that, words spoken in hushed tones? Maybe too much wine, maybe a playful game of charades, but there are no dinners to be had without a computer screen, and games can be played, but it takes so much effort. It will get worse before it gets better. If things were normal, we would celebrate together. Seder meals would be shared, the chair for Elijah, the only one that is empty. We would pass around the cup and break the bread and remember together. Now, so many empty chairs are waiting for a return, and some will never see their guest again. It will get worse before it gets better. If things were normal, you would have the luxury of falling asleep while Jesus is praying in the park. You wouldn't want to, of course. You believe in showing up for your friends. But you would know that they will forgive a moment of weakness when you just can't keep your eyes open. They would overlook your pile up of bodies sleeping together while you wait for them. But Jesus prays alone. Now showing up means staying home. It will get worse before it gets better. If things were normal, crucifixions would stop. This time of struggle would bring an outpouring of mercy that covers all. But people are still carrying crosses more now than ever before. Doctors and nurses are risking their lives for the ones who cannot breathe. Grocery workers stock shelves for us, unable to limit exposure to just their loved ones. Warehouse workers package goods from our online orders, even our impulse buying. It is never finished. Things will never be normal. But now at least the worst is over. There is a hint of resurrection. Across the world, things are starting to move again, and we hope it is just a matter of time. Things may get worse, but they are also better. We are in a kind of Holy Week. We have a heightened sense of the pathos of life. The holy, the sacred is in this liminal space, the threshold between the way things were and the way things will be. When things are normal, we forget that the eternal one is in all this. We sing hosannas, have dinner with friends, celebrate holidays, enjoy parks and prayers together. We forget the betrayals and the denials, the power of the mighty visited upon the marginalized. We don't think at all about the sacrifices the few make for the many. Now we see. Now we see. Now we know. We wait for resurrection. The Holy One draws us into this new normal. I am. I was. I will be. The best is yet to come. Amen. I get sent things every single day about, people singing together and doing stuff together and how people are being creative. And the only one that really made me cry was this next one. Donnell sent it to me. It's just a short little children's story. So this is about the bear.
Time to come in, bear. Time to come in, bear. The world caught a cold. You won't get its germs if you just stay at home. It isn't forever, bear, just for a time. There's still fun to have here with me while inside. We'll climb pillow mountains, build towers sky high. I'll show you a dance. You can teach me to fly. We'll paint with our paws, bear, tell stories, read books. We'll eat lots of pizza. Can you help me cook? Do you know a joke, bear? The world is still funny. Knock, knock. Who's there, bear? It's me and a bunny. No visits with Grandpop. Grand's dinner can wait. A phone call's a great call to keep them both safe. No playdates with friends, bear. You miss them, I know. The next time we see them, we'll make sure it shows. While we stay inside, bear, the heroes still fight to clean up the germs and make the world all right. So sleep tight tonight, bear. Tomorrow, we'll see. And no matter what happens, together we'll be.
I just thought about all those children at home. No, we can't go out. All those parents who are trying to grapple with full-time parenting. And I just, that was the moment for me where I'm like, everything's different. So there's ways to find healing, I think, spiritual healing in times like this. And so this is the time where we have sort of a interview. So Ken and Amy and I are going to have a conversation, a spiritual conversation about suffering and solidarity and how we do that. Ken, I just want to start with you in sort of your Buddhist tradition. What are the ideas about solidarity that sort of frame your and ground your practice?
One of the very first teachings of Buddhism and common amongst all different sects of Buddhism is the idea of the three treasures or three jewels. And it's the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. So the Buddha is the exemplar, the teacher, the example of somebody who's awake, or of kindness and compassion, equated to maybe Jesus. You know, the Dharma is the teachings and all that supports us, and the Sangha is where we live. It's the group, it's the congregation. It's how can you be compassionate without others? How can you be kind without others? How can your practice for yourself is good, and so, but it's a little self-centered if it's just for you, and that's not how we're supposed to live, and so it's one of the primary teachings, and I you know, and we all struggle with it, because we all go to places like what Amy mentioned, where we have judgment, or you know, we're all on a path, and we all see this, and like Amy mentioned, it's like, oh no, that's not the best part of me there. And then you can't hang on to that either. That's where the Dharma comes in and says, okay, I recognize it. I recognize that breath. And now I have a new breath to take. And so you try to reflect, and maybe the practice and maybe being with each other helps you to recover quicker. Or not need, when you're good at it, then maybe you don't have to recover at all, but I'm not there yet. And so that's where our teachings, I think, are really in alignment with being here with you as well, being invited to participate here. It's you know.
Well, an openness to the world, you know, I think that's what I'm hearing you speak about, like an understanding of yourself, of the teachers, and of an openness to the world is how we reach this place of solidarity, where we can talk with each other instead of past each other, and we can act with each other instead of in our own interests, and having that, you know, personal space where you first look at yourself, I guess, hey, you know, you first.
It's okay, and in fact, the only way we can be to have our own authenticity.
Mm-hmm.
But then you can take that authenticity, that foundation, that here I am that Amy mentioned too, and say, I'm okay to be here, but then to embrace this other, that each other person has that here I am, you know. Mm-hmm. And what an experience. You know, we do miss this, being separated and being on our own and things, and we will look forward to gatherings at some point again in the future, but I think it is precious to even meet in this way. Mm-hmm. And a difficulty for us not to be able to meet at a dinner table together, you know.
Mm-hmm. So much of Souls in Sync in particular is built around a meal. So it's interesting. Amy, what about you in terms of your spiritual journey? What is this struggling to solidarity looking like, and where is it grounded?
I think for me, it's deep listening is kind of happening for me, and not in every moment. I have 2 small children, so there are certainly times that feels unavailable as much as I want it to be available. But I think even that, like, there's this, my own personal process has always been to pay attention and to be taught by life. You know, Ken talked about the teacher and life and ourselves. And for me, those are not necessarily discrete entities or discrete places. They are intertwined. And as I mentioned in my reflection, there's this kind of inextricability of all of those things. In a way, they're kind of all bound up together. And the language that I would use is the language of the Holy Spirit. I feel like that Spirit is opening my eyes, opening my ears, and showing me where grace is in ways that I did not expect and could not anticipate.
again, this whole point of awareness seems in both your conversations, this being awake. Being awake is like the first step to being with. Do you know? Like that's like an oxymoron in some senses. Being awake to yourself makes you awake to others. And that's how solidarity comes. And maybe being awake to your struggle, Amy, this is going back to what you said before, being awake to the struggle that you have. And Ken, when you opened up with this meditation, like be aware of the emotions that you're having, like claim them. Being awake and aware to yourself in the solitude and your own struggles is actually the beginning of solidarity.
Yeah, I think that's what I took personally from what I said, Richard Rohr had said about suffering having its way with us. We don't control suffering. We don't get to write the story of what our suffering does. It kind of just, it just works us as if we are the soil. And I never, you know, I'm always cautious to, when I talk about suffering, that I'm not trying to deify suffering or say that like suffering is somehow holier than not suffering. But I don't think, I think that God uses all of the ways of being to teach us. And this is one that I have found in my own life has been particularly profound, is to pay attention to my discomfort. And I think that what I have experienced is that if we could all do that, when we are back together, whenever that is, we may come back together with a newfound tenderness, a newfound self-awareness, a newfound empathy, insight that we didn't have before.
Mm-hmm. One of the big transitions in sort of theological understanding of the understanding of God or the holy has been from Jesus suffered so we suffer, you know, to God sending suffering. There was this idea God sends us suffering so we can learn. Do you know? Goes back to the Garden of Eden. God said, don't eat the fruit of the tree so that I can test your loyalty. And this whole idea of this eternal one just testing us all the time. And it's in the Hebrew scriptures and the Christian scriptures. So it's not like it comes out of nowhere. But all the work that was done through Bonhoeffer and others who were really struggling has come to this. The way of the cross is that God suffers too. You know, that God cries with us. And I suppose if we take it beyond sort of the Judeo-Christian stories or myths, this idea that the earth suffers with us, you know, that the energy of life with each other, we suffer together, and that there's something sacred about that, this struggling together.
Truly, you know, there is no other. And I think that when we can see ourselves, we do see that we are one with creation. We are one with the divine. And the barriers that we have that are kind of the, you know, our bodies and all of those things, the more we focus in and pay attention to what draws us together, those almost seem to dissolve a little bit. But I think you nailed it, Joanne, in saying that presence and awareness is sort of that key that allows it. It's almost like a threshold where you kind of go through the eye of the needle in the way. And it's that paradox in our stories of, you know, the Christian stories of like, how is it that this crucified Jew actually rules the cosmos? You know, that is so weird. It's so backwards and it doesn't make sense in so many ways. And I think that paradox is really key to not only to our story, but to the human story of like, there is triumph in tragedy, and there is sort of this peace in disruption. And what troubles the water is sort of the clearest reflection. So I think embracing paradox is something that comes beautifully out of the Christian tradition and many others. And I think it's something that for me is quite comforting. It's like, okay, I can be uncomfortable, and there's a beyond that.
There's also this idea that struggles, and when we struggle together, great creativity comes out of that. And progress in terms of, you want to call it progress, but progress in terms of human spiritual awareness, scientific awareness, whatever, has always come out of these struggles that we have. My hope for this time, when we've stopped some, when the earth, some parts are healing a bit, when we've learned to treasure so much the connections we have with each other, is that it continues when things go back to normal. That we've actually, as a humanity, because when have we ever, as the entire planet, had this kind of, we're all in this together? Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no country against country. It's not like a war in that sense. It's like the whole planet. I forget what percentage of the world is in isolation right now. You know, it starts in Asia, it moves to Europe, it's in North America, and we're all experiencing the same struggle. There is something about this common enemy that could unite us even further if we're open and aware to how this has changed us. Now, Ken, do you have any comments on that?
Well, I just keyed on the word struggle and battle in a way, in the sense that to win this battle, there is no external, there's no war to go on. There is only a battle of love to win it.
Mm-hmm.
That our health workers, who I'm going to say presumably join that profession to help people, are giving of themselves, sometimes in the ultimate way. You know, and people who may have just taken a job to drive a transport truck may be giving of themselves in an ultimate way right now, and they're equal, and they're not the billionaires, you know, they're people, and it just reminds us of this equanimity and equality amongst us, sharing this human experience in Yeah.
Does anyone else have any questions or comments on this whole idea? Struggle, solidarity, being awake. Thank you for this conversation. Amy, I'm going to turn it over to you to do a moving prayer as we close, and then we'll do that last song, Somewhere Out There, from the American Tale. Amy, a prayer.
Hey guys, okay, so I'm just gonna have to move so you can actually see me better. So bear with me as I just change my position. But I did check earlier, so you should be able to see me to my lap. Is that right? Can everyone see me okay? Great.
Yep.
Thumbs up, yeah. Okay, so the prayer I'm gonna teach you comes to me through my spiritual director, and a real wonderful teacher on my path. And she learned it from teachers of hers, and it's sort of made from an amalgamation of faith traditions, which I thought was really suited for us today. And it's really about presence. At times you may feel that it's too slow, or you want me to hurry up and get it on with it, but I just invite you to settle into the moment, similar to how we did with Ken earlier. Just plant your feet on the floor if you can, or if you're sitting crisscross, just plant your seat onto the floor. You could also do this standing if you felt like you needed to get up at this point and move. That's okay too. I'm going to talk us through the hand positions, and then we're just going to do it with the mantra together several times over. So the first position is feet on floor, hands on your lap, looking straight ahead. The instruction my teacher gave me is eyes straight ahead, to remind us that there is only the present moment, which I think couldn't have fit better with the conversation that we had. So, and we'll start with the word I. Second position, hands kind of cupped like this, just over your heart center. These are called the wings of the heart. This is in the Sufi tradition, this hand position. So they're meant to be sort of wings around your heart. Am, and then looking up toward the heavens, raise your hands here. And then I will cross our arms, rest your fingers onto your collarbone. I am here. Now there's 4 hand positions and 3 words, so each round will be different. When we land back with our hands here, we will be completed. So is everybody okay? Should everybody understand? Just follow along with me if you feel like you're lost, but we'll start hands on the lap. Okay, I am here. I am here. I am here. I am here. We'll go one more time. Am here. I am here. I am here. I am here. Blessings to all of you. It's easy to do, and it's a great way to center yourself that you can do at home. And if you've got anyone at home, you can teach it to them very easily too, including kids. So thanks.
Thank you, both centering before and after. So thank you for your time here with us today at Souls in Sync. May will be the next one, and we'll be sending out information on how that will happen. We may be live streaming at that point, but we'll see how that is. So, all right, that is it, Souls in Sync. So thank you all for coming. Thanks for your comments on the chat. It is so good to see all of you. Thanks again to my friend Jean Peterson, whose art we used today. Thank you for your solidarity in love that can change the world. Amen. Peace to all of you. Peace. Farewell.